Hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine, and this is your Rattlecast for January 7th, 2020, our first Rattlecast of the year. Sorry for the delay coming in. We're having a bit of a technical difficulty with today's guest, Barbara Crooker, so we're going to have to do it over the phone, I think. But that'll work fine. You just won't be able to see Barbara, unfortunately, but she'll be in over the phone. And so let's keep rolling. Let's do this Rattlecast thing. If you have any questions for Barbara coming on later, do pass them along through the Skype chat window, and I'll pass them on to Barbara. We're going to be talking about her book, Some Glad Morning, in just a little bit. And but first, we like to do a warm-up poem as people trickle in, although coming in 5 minutes late, or 8 minutes late, I think people are already trickled. But let's try that out. So today, for the warm-up poem, we're going to do, let's switch over here to the screen. This is today's poem, Poets Respond poem, the featured daily poem today. And there's some great audio reading by Martina Spada. So I thought I would play that poem for you. First, let me read the note so you know what's going on here. This is from Martina Spada. This poem is an elegy for a dear friend and mentor, written to mark the first anniversary of his death on January 8th. Luis Gardena Costa, through his activism, organizing, and vision, not only changed his community in Brooklyn, but the lives of untold thousands like me. So please see his obituary in the New York Times. There's a link here on the website if you go to rattle.com. And please see the Luis Garden Acosta Legacy Fund at El Puente. And there's a link there too, if anybody's interested in donating to that. And here is Martina Spada reading his poem for his friend Luis Garden Acosta. This is Morir Soñando.
Morir Soñando, for Luis Garden Acosta, 1945 to 2019, Brooklyn, New York. I saw the empty cross atop the empty church on South 4th Street, as if Jesus flapped his arms and flew away, spooked by one ambulance siren too many. I saw the stained glass windows I wanted to break with a brick, the mural of St. Mary and the angels hovering innocent as spies over the congregation, and wanted to know why you brought me here, the son of a man punched in the face by a priest for questioning the Trinity, who punched him back. This is El Puente, you said, the bridge. I knew about the Williamsburg Bridge, 8 lanes of traffic and the subway stampeding in the open windows of the barrio all summer. You spread your arms in that abandoned church and saw the spinning of a carousel better than any wooden horses pumping up and down a Coney Island. Here, the ESL classes for the neighbors cursed with swollen tongues in English. There, the clinics on contraception, the pestilence in the veins of the unsuspecting. Here, the karate lessons, feet spearing the air to keep schoolyard demons away. There, the dancers in white, swirling their skirts to the drumming of bomba. Here, the workshops on Puerto Rican history, La Masacre de Ponce, where your mother's beloved painted his last words on the street with a fingertip of blood. I was a law student, first year, memorizing law school Latin, listening to classical guitar on my boom box as I studied the rules of property. It's mine, it's not yours. I saw only what could be proven by a preponderance of the evidence. The church abandoned by the church, the cross atop the church abandoned by the Son of God. My belly empty as St. Mary of the Angels. I told you I was hungry, and we left. I wanted Chinese food, but you told me about the Chinese takeout down the block where you stood behind a man who shrieked about the price of wonton soup, left, and returned with a can of gasoline, splashed it on the floor, and pulled a box of kitchen matches from his pocket. Will you wait till I pick up my egg roll and pork fried rice? You said, with a high school teacher's exasperated authority. So he did. You could talk an arsonist into postponing his inferno till you left with lunch, but you couldn't raise the dead in the ER at Greenpoint Hospital, even in your suit and tie. You couldn't convince the girl called Sugar to rise from the gurney after the gunshot drained the blood from her body. You couldn't persuade the doctor who peeled his gloves and shook his head to bring her back to life, telling him, "Do it again," an arsonist in medical scrubs trying to strike a wet match. You couldn't jump-start the calliope in her heart so the carousel of horses would rise and fall and rise again. Whenever you saw the gutted church, you would see the sheets of the gurney dipped in red, all the gurneys rolling into the ER with a sacrifice of adolescence. We walked to the luncheonette on Havemeyer Street. A red awning announced, "Morir soñando." "To die dreaming," you said, "from the DR, my mother's island." The boy at the counter who spoke no English, brown as my father, called Martin like me, grinned the way you grinned at El Puente once, St. Mary of the Angels. He squeezed the oranges into a drizzle of juice with evaporated milk, cane sugar, and ice, shook the elixir, and poured it till the froth spilled over the lip of the glass. Foam freckled my snout as I raised my hand for another. Intoxicated by Morir Soñando No. 3 and the prophet gently rocking at my table, I had a vision. ESL classes, healing the jaws wired shut by English, clinics full of adolescents studying the secrets of the body, unspeakable in the kitchen or the confessional, karate students landing bare feet on the mat with a thump and grunt in unison, bomba dancers twirling to a song in praise of Yoruba gods abolished by the priests, the words of Puerto Rican rebels painted on the walls by brushes dipped in every color, pressed in the pages of notebooks by a generation condemned to amnesia. Morir soñando. Luis, I know you died dreaming of South 4th Street, the banners that said no to the toxic waste plant down the block, or the Navy bombarding an island of fishermen for target practice thousands of miles away. Morir soñando. I know you died dreaming of vejigantes, carnival mascaras bristling with horns that dangle with the angels at El Puente. Morir soñando. I know you died dreaming of the next El Puente. Morir soñando. I know you died dreaming of the hammer's claw, the drill whining to the screw, the dust like snow in a globe, then the shy genius raising her hand in the back of the room. Morir soñando. I know you died dreaming of the poets who stank of weed in the parking lot, then stood before the mic you electrified for them and rubbed their eyes when the faces in their poems crowded there, waiting for the first word, so we could all die dreaming, morir soñando, intoxicated by the elixir of the tongue, oh, rocking prophet at my table.
So that was Martin Espada reading his poem Morir Soñando for Luis Gardena Costa. I'm trying to get, as we were doing that, I was trying to adjust. I'm having trouble with Skype here for the first time. At first we thought, let's see. At first we thought that Barbara Crooker just couldn't hear me and it was something with her speakers, but my Skype is frozen. We had her video. Let's see. I'm not sure if this might cut out. We're back, and it started automatically. So we're here with Barbara Crooker. Sorry for the trouble, everybody. Kim Tedra is saying that we're live, and our chat about when to end the poems and all that stuff was included. So let me just reset. We'll start from scratch. Let me read Barbara's bio. Barbara Crooker is the author of 8 books of poetry, including La Flavis. How do you say that? Since you're here, might as well.
Okay. Well, so 9 books of poetry. This is the 9th.
Okay.
And Les Fauves was the 7th.
Ah, okay.
Les Fauves.
And so your first book, Radiance, which I remember really well. I don't know if I just randomly sent a copy, or I think actually somebody sent a review copy of it, and we have a review on our website, and I read it after the review. It's a great book. That came out in 2005. It also was a finalist for the Paterson Poetry Prize. And your most recent book is Here's Some Glad Morning from the Pitt Poetry Series, which is my favorite. I have to be honest. I looked through the Pitt Poetry Series website and just pick the poets we'd publish, because I know I love those books, and that's why we have Barbara Crooker here, because I thought, oh, Barbara Crooker's on Pitt now. I love Pitt. So
I love Pitt too.
yeah. So do you want to start us out with this awkward introduction? But do you want to start us out with a poem, and then we'll talk a little bit?
Sure. Well, I thought I'd start off with one appropriate for the time of year. It's called The New Year.
And do you say the page number so I can flip to it for everybody really quick?
Sure. Page 63.
Okay.
The New Year. When a door bangs shut, a window doesn't open. Sometimes it slams on your fingers. God often gives us more than we can handle. A sorrow shared is a sorrow multiplied. There's a bottle of champagne waiting to be uncorked, but it's not for you. Nobody wants another poem. The prize-winning envelope has someone else's name on it. This year, you already know you're not going to lose those 10 pounds. How can you feel hope when the weight of last year's rejections is enough to bury you? Still, the empty page craves the pen, wants to feel the black ink unscrolling on its skin. In spite of everything, you sit at your desk and begin.
Ooh, thanks, Barbara. That's a good sort of poem to start with, because I was wondering, one of the things I'm always curious about is why we do this. And that sort of brings up the question. How did you get into writing poetry, and why the heck do you do it, despite all the rejections rolling in, for all of us?
For all of us. For one thing, I have a poem called 25 Years of Rejection Slips in that first book. And honestly, that was the case for me. Mm-hmm. It was a long time coming. Stephen King said about his writing, well, when someone said, why do you write? He said, what makes you think we have a choice? And I think that's my answer. I think I cannot not write.
Yeah, that was something that when I was in an MFA program, I always felt like I didn't have to, and other people felt compelled. And it's interesting to watch as I have the option not to. Sort of, I don't really much anymore. And so, so where do you think that compulsion comes from? What is the source that makes you want to write, though? What drives that?
See, I think those of us who are writing were born to write, and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. I don't write all the time. I don't think anybody writes all the time. There are long dry spells, and I'm just coming out of one of them. But then, boy, when the poems are coming, mm-hmm. there's just nothing better.
Yeah.
And I don't think I like writing. I only like to have written.
Mm-hmm. So, and you, I was doing the math. So you have a son who is in his 30s, and you sort of exploded on the literary scene, I'd say, about 2005. So over that 15 years, you've published 9 books now, like a book more than every other year. And what was it like before that happened, though? Were you always trying to publish, and it took that long to build up to books and things? Or was it sort of like you took a whole hiatus? Because I know you studied poetry in college. Did you take a break, or was it always working at poetry throughout your whole life?
It's been always working at poetry, but getting published was just a whole other thing. Now, I don't have an MFA. I'm kind of outside the poetry loop, and the son that's in his 30s has autism. So I've been a caretaker at home with him. And so I was writing all of that time. All those books were written during that time. I just couldn't break into book publication.
Okay. So you have this whole secret stash of poems and books. Is it?
I did. And then Pitt came along for this book
mm-hmm.
and actually asked for the manuscript.
Oh, wow.
And cleaned me out.
Wow, that's great, though. It's great to hear. So people are already asking some questions. I should just say, if anybody has any questions for Barbara, I'll pass them along. And because this is really, what we're doing is we're sitting around enjoying poetry and getting to meet a poet every Tuesday night. And so tonight we're meeting Barbara Crooker from Pennsylvania. Do you want to read maybe 2 poems, and then we'll do a couple of questions?
Sure.
Okay.
So I'll just pick one that I really like. Principles of Accounting.
Okay. And what page?
I'm on page 21.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
Principles of Accounting. Nearly summer, and the trees are banking on green, calculating their bonuses in numerators of leaves. Outside my window, the crows are ganging up on someone, thugs in their hoodies of night. I'm feeling the number of days begin to feel finite, no longer uncountable as blades of grass. So I'm rounding off clouds to the nearest decade, tabulating interest from the sweetness in the air. I'm going for broke in the time remaining, like the mockingbird letting loose his vocals of Fort Knox of sound. I'm going to spend it all. Not like our legislature who can't pass a budget, letting 1 year roll into the next while schools and social services borrow to pay their providers, leaving even less in the diminishing pot for those who need it the most. Road repair, bridges, pre-K? Not sustainable, say the fat cats, lapping up their cream. For the rest of us, the dice are rigged, the loopholes big enough to drive a camel through. From this distance, the older I get, the closer I see the handbasket coming. So let me lean back in this red Adirondack chair as dusk makes us all equal, happy for the blend of herbs and gin, pure sapphire, the dividend of olive at the end. Here comes the night. Nothing we can do to stop it, except tote up the stars on a ledger sheet and put every last one of them in the plus column. And that's followed in the book by Dry Martini. I actually have 2 martini poems in this book, and I did a little martini research, and I came across this wonderful quote from H.L. Mencken, that dry martini, the only American invention as perfect as a sonnet. So I wrote a sonnet. The cold shimmer of a glass of gin, kissed with vermouth. Or, as Noel Coward said, waved in the general direction of Italy. E.B. White called it the elixir of quietude. Louis Buñuel, a reverie in a bar. Let the molecules lie sensuously, calm on top of one another, stirred, not shaken, wrote Somerset Maugham. Let's not forget the olives, groups of 3, sinking beneath the horizon of the glassy sea.
And that was Dry Martini from Some Glad Morning. So Barbara, something that interests me, I felt like this was a poem. We were talking a little bit as you're trying to get the technical stuff worked out. And what I loved about this book was the amount of praise you have. So it was really interesting to talk about or hear that the poem were elegies originally. And that's because of how you think of the book. How do you think that sort of poetry operates within sort of praise and problem solving? I kind of feel like that's sort of what goes on with poetry. We sort of have things that sort of itch at us and don't make sense, and we kind of put them together through poems. And it always feels to me that like positive bits are always overlooked in poetry. Are you conscious of that as you write? Because I was looking through too the poems that we've published of yours, and there's a lot more positivity in your poems than in most.
That's a really interesting notion. I don't think I'm conscious of much of anything when I'm writing. I'm trying to let the poem show me where the poem wants to go. I kind of take as my motto something that Wendell Berry said, which is to be joyful, even though you've considered all the facts. And I'm not, when we were talking before, it's not that the poems were elegies and they turned into something else. There are elegies in the book. And I think, there's some very dark poems in the book about the death of my first child, for example, but somehow I'm drawn to joy, and it's difficult to write happy, I think.
Yeah, it is, because it seems to me like happy doesn't have a problem, so there's nothing to like work at. That's sort of how it seems to me. And so when stuff can pop up, I was wondering if you could read the second poem in the book. Because today,
Sure.
just before we went on air and before we had all these problems, I saw that there's a missile attack from Iran on a military base. And so this whole thing is escalating. And just looking back at this poem, while that was going on my Twitter feed, it's poem ending with a line from a workshop, if you don't mind reading that. It really felt, that there's a sort of grounding that happens when you sort of take in the big picture and think about life in this context or something.
I think that's a wise comment. I have to say that one of the reasons I write, I think, is to make sense of the world, which doesn't often make sense. And I think my primary impulse in poetry is the lyric, but my lyric poems are getting hijacked by politics these days.
Yeah.
And what happens. Poem ending with a line from a workshop on page 4. April, and the hills are smeared with pastel chalks, mauve red buds, hopeful green leaves, a scene that might have been painted by Odilon Redon. In Syria, the hills are ripe with bombs, further denuding a country in crisis. Here, early tulips flicker, light up the town square. There, children search the rubble for what's edible. How can we believe in spring when we can no longer trust our own government, the one rising from a swamp of lies? The rocket's red flare, tulips bursting in air. Children with kites in a green park. Children on stretchers poisoned with gas. Families ripped apart. Children searching for candy and eggs. Children looking for their lost parents. The world's plenty. The world's misery. The possibilities for answers are ash.
Yes, that was another poem from Some Glad Morning. We have a few, we have regular watchers here who watch live, and they have some great questions all the time. And David Cook is one of those, and he says, Barbara, you said you took your best poems from your out-of-print chapbooks to put in your selected poems. How do you determine what best is?
Oh, David, what a good question. It's almost, I edit a small journal, and I don't know, to me, the poems that are the best just kind of rise to the top and sing, and they're the easy ones to pick. I did a lot of editing to make the chapbooks, so there were already some, what I thought were some pretty darn good poems in the chapbooks, so it really wasn't that difficult to just leave out a few.
Mm-hmm.
And that selected poems volume is a bit of a misnomer. That's what that series is called, but it's really selected early poems, poems leading up to when I had my first full-length book. Mm-hmm. So I had 12 chapbooks before I had a full-length book.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you really have been at it for a lot.
I have been at it.
Let's see. And Kim Tedrow says, Barbara, how do you help yourself transition from the dry spells to where the poems start coming? Do you have any tips for Kim Tedrow? She's a poet in Nebraska who's also a regular here at the Rattlecast.
Hi, Kim. Yeah, I read. I read a lot. I said this at a conference once, and the audience was taken aback, but I actually read every journal I'm in. I read every journal I'm in twice, once for pleasure and once I take notes. And the more I read, the more it leads me into writing another poem.
Well, since you mentioned that, and don't say rattle, but what are your favorite journals?
I do read rattle.
No,
I definitely do read rattle.
But what are your favorite journals to read? Like, what's out there right now that you really enjoy?
That's a tough question because a lot of the journals that I really enjoy are changing editors. So Poet Lore was one of my all-time favorites, but now there's a new cast of editors and I'm not sure about their selections. I've always liked Nimrod. There's so many good places. Valparaiso Poetry Review, an online journal. Innisfree Poetry Review, also an online journal.
Yeah. Do you have a preference between online and print? Because I used to think that print was better, and now I prefer online, I think, because online sort of lives forever. And there's a sense of like once you publish in a print journal, it has like a shelf life, and then no one's going to look at it again. But online, somebody could come back to the poem 20 years from now, and there's still an internet, I assume, as long as we don't end the world in thermonuclear war. And people will be, discovering poems. You find a poet you like, and you do a deep dive, and you read all these poems. So in a way, online poems to me seem better. I guess I'm leading the question here. But,
well, I think I agree with you. A writer that I'm fond of that I was chatting with at a colony, he said, I only want to appear in places where I can hold the book in my hand. And I thought, well, okay, I understand that, but I don't think so anymore. I think, it's wonderful that I can collect all of the poems that I've published online and put them on my website, and anybody who wants to find them can find them that way. Although a caveat is that journals that go out of business sometimes don't continue to maintain their websites.
Yeah, that's true. What do you think is it about print? Do you think print will last? You've published 9 books and 12 chapbooks, apparently. Do you think there's something that adds that you don't get through digital medium?
I think there's something wonderful about holding a book of poetry in your hand and having the cover art and the feel of the paper. I mean, I think it's the way I want to read books of poetry. But having said that, and having spent a lot of really hard work and careful time putting a book together, doing the ordering, I hear from readers all the time that they just kind of like to flip open to a poem in the same way that musicians construct their CDs or albums and then people want to listen on Spotify.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. And I find I do the same thing too. I mean, I just I shouldn't admit it, but I always take a poetry book to the bathroom and read one while in the bathroom. And that's a beautiful thing for that. And then you find things, and then it goes from the shelf of like, maybe I'll read someday to I'm going to read this whole book soon. And that's sort of how it works for me. Do you want to read a few more?
Sure. I'm going to read Butter on page 16.
Okay.
And again, I got a wonderful epigraph. Butter, give me butter, always butter. Fernand Point, a French chef. Kneeling on green grass beside the still blue water, an Indian maiden, or shall I say Native American woman or first person, holds out a yellow box of butter as if it were treasure. And she's also on the box, which turns her into one of those endlessly repeating images in a convex mirror beloved by Renaissance painters. Behind her, there's a large red O, the sun also rising. Even the sky is pale yellow, thick as Irish cream. In this, the age of low-fat cholesterol watching, butter has been shunned. We've forgotten the pleasure of a single pat turning liquid, a golden lake atop a small hill of mashed potatoes, the gilding of a slice of raisin toast, or the slow sinking into the crevices of a Thomas's muffin. During the war, butter was rationed. My mother bought oleomargarine, which came in white blocks. We helped her knead in the dot of red dye, which restored it to dairyness. Let us imagine it might have come from a cow, not a chemist. Now we live in a time of plenty where supermarkets are fully stocked. Can't imagine lining up for hours only to find that there's nothing left, that no matter how many dollars you have, it's not enough, nothing to buy. And yet we know, or should know, what's coming as we ignore the warnings about climate change, drowned cities, crop failures, scarcities. Somewhere in the future, a small girl will unearth this box as she sifts through garbage looking for treasure. She will sound out the word with something like wonder. She will ponder sweet, cream, salted, try to imagine the taste, something rare and wonderful from the world that disappeared.
Yeah, that's a great example of what I was talking about for praise. There's a weird way that the poems in this book seems to me sort of to be a slap in the face saying, you know, it's bad, but it could be worse. And so enjoy what's here, like the butter. And I don't know, I really appreciated that.
Or how about let's really look at what's here, what's in front of us, whether it's the world outside or something wonderful to eat. But think about what it might be like if we don't have these things anymore. Mm-hmm. One of my poems, not from this book, someone wrote to me with a request for an anthology that will come out, but not until 2021, of all the things that we're going to lose with climate change. So my poem's about olive oil. I'm afraid there's a poem about chocolate and probably something about wine in there. I mean, all of the things that make life worth living that we might lose.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to read that one?
That's in another book, and I don't have that in front of me. Thanks. Gotcha. Thank you anyway. How about a poem that's, all right, this is elegy, but this is probably the most different elegy you'll hear. A poem that combines Zumba and the National Basketball Association. It's on page 47, and it's Big Man. And it's from my buddy Daryl Dawkins, who is an NBA great and a member of my Zumba class.
Oh, wow.
We saw him twice a week on the dance floor, this huge man, nearly 7 feet tall, surrounded by us middle-aged, out-of-shape women. Big man, big smile, and a hug for everyone, which for me meant being pressed by a waistband. Later, we found out he was a basketball star, played for the Sixers, invented the slam dunk, even named them. Rim Wrecker, Look Out Below, Yo Mama. He could feint, take his man to the hole, then soar over his head to the backboard, which fractured in an explosion of lethal confetti. Looked like he could fly. Earthbound now, in class he was one of us, carrying the weight and freight of age, aching hips, bad backs. Shimmy left, merengue right, do that booty roll, swivel what hurts. Oh, Daryl, death's point guard has taken you down with a sharp elbow to the ribs. Shine on. In that great gymnasium of the night sky, may your light rise up, join the jagged pieces of shattered blackboards that some people call the stars.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. And that was I remember Daryl Dawkins, watching the NBA.
Yeah. Chocolate Thunder.
Yeah.
Stevie Wonder gave him that nickname.
Yeah.
And he really was the nicest person I've ever met.
Oh, I bet.
And,
yeah.
When you go to, say, AWP and you see people who be talking to you, but they're looking around for somebody more important to talk to, Daryl was the opposite of that. Daryl had a smile for everybody.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. Let's see, another question from David Cook. He says, your poems with the theme of grief are powerful, prolific, and popular. Are there poems that, when you read them, bring you tears every time? yours or someone else's poem. He mentions Updike's Dog Death is his poem that makes him cry.
Oh, yeah, that poem would make me cry too. I think, when you perform poetry and you read the same poems over and over again, you end up with a certain distance, which allows you to read them without breaking into tears. I have a poem in one of my other books about my middle daughter's. She had a traumatic brain injury when she was a senior in high school, and she was in a coma for 9 days. And I thought I could never read that poem in public, but I ended up reading it a lot of times. So there is something about practice and repetition that allows you to have the distance to still read with feeling, but to not completely break down.
Do you find that you cry a lot while writing? Like it's in the process of it?
Yeah, sure. And there, certainly there is a poem here about the death of my first child, which I haven't read any of these poems aloud, actually, because the book has just come out. I think it's personal history. I could read that one. It's on page 10.
Yeah, please do.
And we'll see if I can read it without crying.
Okay.
Personal history. Tell me about the light you have lost. It was the breath of my first baby, the one never taken. The doctor's words, sharp as scalpels. Her skin on my fingertips, petals of heliotrope. What tools do you need to recover? Paper, pen, blood instead of ink. The pollen of memory clings to my sleeves. As small as the wind's shadow, the fleeting glimpse of her face. And it's a subject I've written about, I don't know how many poems, maybe 10. There's certain subjects that I think I'm done writing about, and then another angle or another poem comes. And I feel like poems come from mysterious places, and my job is to stand out of the way and put them down on paper and then craft them later.
How far into your writing process? Well, actually, first of all, because can you explain your writing process a little bit? And then I was going to ask, how far into your writing process do you know where it's a successful poem? Like, is there a spot where you know, like, oh, this is doing something, as opposed, because I know you write, often and by hand, right?
I mean, that's an excellent question. I remember the movie Shakespeare in Love. It's a mystery. And for me, writing poetry is a mystery. I can put every bit of craft I've got into poems that end up dead on arrival. They just don't lift off the page. They don't sing and dance. And I don't really know why. Talking about my writing process sounds like something a little more organized than I am. I sit down there and I just kind of chip away at it. I tend to write big and then edit small. So I write a lot of junk, and then in the editing process try to cut away everything that isn't really a poem. But sometimes wonderful little poems just come out almost fully formed. And I don't know what happens to make them come out that way, other than I think it's all the unsuccessful poems. It's kind of like they come on the back of those poems.
like you're due, like the universe is throwing you a bone or something to keep you going. Because, we're the eyes and ears and heart of the universe kind of as human beings. So
Yeah. And, I mean, I think that maybe sometimes we're afraid of writing bad poems. There's nothing wrong with writing a bad poem. You just don't have to try to publish it. They are better left in the drafts folder.
Yeah. Have you ever published a poem that you sort of didn't think you should have? That you regret later?
So far, no, I don't think. I mean, I can say I think some poems are more successful than others, but not ones that I wish I hadn't published now.
Yeah. Well, why don't you read a couple more?
Okay.
And well, I should say again, if anybody who knew, people are joining us in now that we're actually. I told people to come back at 6 or at 45 after, and we came back on without me even realizing at 6:30. So there are new people here. If you have a question for Barbara you want me to pass along, just leave it in the chat. Also, despite the technical difficulties, if you like this broadcast, do click the like button and share it, and make sure your friends subscribe. After the fact, we'll cut out the long delay, and it'll still be good, so you won't have to be embarrassed by your like. So click that like button if you would. It helps a lot. Okay, so Barbara, what do you have for us next?
Okay, so let's do something different. One other area that I keep going back to is ekphrastic poetry. I have a lot of ekphrastic poems about paintings. In this particular one, the impulse, normally I don't write to other people's suggestions. I think there's the phrase that I hate the most is, "Oh, you should write a poem about this." That immediately makes me not want to write a poem about whatever that is.
Or just that's a poem. That comment.
Yeah.
Anything that happens in life, it was a poem. Yeah.
No, it's not a poem. But in this case, this was an invitational anthology. And each person that was invited to participate in this anthology was supposed to first create a still life, then take a photo of this still life, and then write a poem about it. Well, I spent a couple of months and nothing was coming to me at all. And then we were in the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, and I realized what was happening. And I said to my husband, "Stop, we're going to just stay here, and I'm going to take a picture in a few minutes, and then I'm going to be able to write this poem." So here it is. The Bal du Moulin de la Galette, which is a painting by Pierre-Auguste Renoir.
In what page?
I'm on page 31. Jostled and elbowed at the Musée d'Orsay by people clicking first at each painting and then at its attribution, I start to realize no one's looking at the canvases, just their screens. And so my nature mort composes itself as I wait by the leather banquettes for a few still minutes, until a flock of cell phone users settles like pigeons on a park bench, more interested in checking messages and posting on Facebook than watching Renoir's dancers whirling and dipping, light and shade stippling their stiff dresses, their serge suits, their rosy skin. Here in Montmartre, on a Sunday afternoon, the hall is bathed in sun filtering through the trees, dappling the woman in the blue and white striped dress, the men with their straw boaters. Even the glasses on the table ring with song. But on this Sunday, in the museum, none of this registers. Hunched over, waiting for the ping of incoming, faces laved in pixelated light, drawn to the world of two dimensions. Thumbs are the only things moving. A faint hint of batter sizzling in butter enters the room, along with distant phrases of accordion music. You can almost hear the turtle doves twitter and tweet in the far-off trees. So just one little comment is that nature mort is the French word for still life. It means dead nature, but that reference possibly needs an explanation. And the moulin de la galette, the galette was a kind of a thin cake, so that's the butter and the batter in the last couple of lines. Mm-hmm. But such an irony that here's this fabulous museum and nobody is looking at the paintings. They're only looking at their phones taking pictures of the paintings.
Well, that's the world we live in now.
It is.
About ekphrastic poems, do you have any advice? Because we have that, we do it once a month, an ekphrastic challenge.
I know.
And it's interesting, you don't have the painting with it. Do you think that, does it make a difference if you're going to show the painting with a poem or not? Are you trying to partially describe what's going on here?
Well, Well, I think you always want to give the reader of the poem some reference points to the painting that's in front of you. Now, I noticed in your ekphrastic challenges, you're using some very modern stuff that people won't be familiar with. I tend to be writing about paintings that people can Google on their phones so that they can see them. And there's a wonderful journal called the Ekphrastic Review, which gets the images and pairs them with the paintings, so that a lot of my work has appeared it's kind of a secondary market because they've appeared in literary journals first, but then the Ekphrastic Review also selects some of them.
It's always nice when people do that.
Yeah.
Have a new sort of life. I always thought that there should be
I think so too.
Local poetry magazines, where something that there's sort of a niche that nobody does. If you had like all the local poets republishing poems in a magazine locally, but the same kind of thing. It's really nice to have some, second lives, because poems deserve more than one.
Yeah. But it's also something I've been learning, say, doing workshops on ekphrastic poetry. I mean, it's nice to have a slide up on a white screen so that people can all write about the same painting. But if the visual isn't working that day, you can just have them all take out their phones and find the painting.
That sort of brings something else up, too, because you mentioned that you tend to write about older paintings. And I was looking at an interview you did somewhere else, and you talked about how originally as a writer, you were writing in an old style. And somebody said to you, read some modern poetry, way back when you were in college.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a way that you're drawn to the past for any reason?
Well, I think that was simply a question of where I was at the time. I had taken a class on contemporary American writers as an undergraduate, and they were all dead white males. So that was just me not really aware of the world of contemporary poetry. And there was a wonderful fiction writer named Asa Baber. He's now passed on, but he looked at the manuscript I had at that point, and I was a very beginning writer then, and he said extremely gently, but you need to be reading your contemporaries. And he really set me on the writing path. Again, because of my family circumstances, I wasn't able to get an MFA. When I started writing, the only MFAs were at University of Iowa, places where you'd have to leave your family, and I had 3 small children. So I feel like I got the MFA of the 3,000 books, because that's about how many poetry books I have that I've just bought and studied, and taken out books from interlibrary loan and studied on my own. But I've actually never taken a workshop or a class from somebody else.
Oh, really? Not a single one?
I'm in Fogelsville, Pennsylvania. I'm in the suburbs or the country above Fogelsville, Pennsylvania, which is 2 blocks long. So I'm completely isolated.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But with who knew the internet would happen? And, that's connected us all in ways that are amazing.
Yeah, it really has. Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned, being a mother and, with a special needs son too. Can you talk about how do you find time to write as much as you do, given all your responsibilities? Do you carve out certain windows that you sort of give to yourself, or is it just when you can? Is there a process that you've managed to do it?
Well, when the 2 older girls, who are not really children. One of them's close to 50. But I was writing all along. Maybe I was writing during nap time. Then maybe I was writing during nursery school. And then they'd go off to school. And then, oh my goodness, I'd have another baby. When my son came along with many more severe needs and more needs of my time, I still tried to find time every day to write. That's Evan Boland, the Irish writer, said when her children were small, some days I only wrote a line, some days I only wrote part of a line, but every day I wrote. And when I wasn't writing, I was thinking about writing. And I think that's the case for me as well. But around 1990, I think, I got my first residency at an artist colony, the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. And I think I only went for 7 days, maybe, or 9 days the first time. And I realized, okay, if I could come back here again in 18 months, because that's kind of the space they like between residencies, I can not only keep writing, I can save my own life. And that place has been a magical place for me. Now I've branched out. I had a couple of residencies at their studio in France, and I had a couple of residencies at the Tyrone Guthrie Center in County Monaghan, Ireland. Just give me some time alone and I'll start writing.
Mm-hmm. Can you say a little bit more about that, how it saved your life? That's always something that I feel like, I enjoy poems, but one of the things that we do by publishing and sharing poems is just allowing poems to be, which is such a good thing for everybody's soul as they write them. So how did poetry save your life? That was an interesting thing to say.
Well, I'm not sure poetry saved my life so much as being able to step away from my life as a caregiver. And, raising a child with autism is not a walk in the park. I'm happy to say that as a 35-year-old, he's a very nice young man, very kind and very sweet. But, it simply gave me back my own life, which is the life that everybody else would take for granted, that you could go to the bathroom by yourself, that you could take a shower by yourself, that you could go for a walk without having to get a babysitter. Just a lot of things like that. And I find that when I'm at a colony, when you take away domestic responsibilities, such as food preparation, there are a lot more hours in the day. And I basically dive in. I have some ideas of things I want to pursue, and I read, write, and walk for as many hours as I can be upright. And I find that in a 2-week residency, I can get a year's worth of work done.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or even more than a year's worth of work done.
That's great.
Because I'm actually a very slow writer. I'm just a very old writer at this point, and have had a backlog of poems.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Barbara. We have a few minutes left. Do you want to read maybe 1 or 2 more poems and then to close us out?
Sure. Let me give you a short, fun poem. Another thing that's been pretty wonderful for me is Garrison Keillor reading poems on the Writer's Almanac, which is not something I ever imagined would happen. And he happened to read this one recently, and it was on my husband's birthday, which was just such a nice coincidence. Home cooking, page 72. Let me stir up a batch of something hot, beef stew or red bean chili, something simmering just below the boil. You let me know if it needs more seasoning, more spice. Let me spread some butter on your cornbread, darling. Let it soak into all the cracks. Let me fill your glass with something red and juicy. The oven is hot and all the burners are glowing. If you can't take the heat, then get out of my kitchen. But if you need to take the chill off, baby, I might be able to dish a little something up.
Let me ask about that before we do the last poem.
Sure.
Why do you think Garrison Keillor loves your poem so much? How did that happen?
I have no idea.
He's read so many of them, and I listen all the time. That I actually, while reading this book, I hear it in his voice sometimes. Like some of the poems, I actually hear in his voice from how often you've been on that, which is just a cool thing.
It's a very cool thing. I don't actually ever get to hear it because my NPR station's out of Philadelphia and they never carried the show.
Oh, we don't even have radio here, so I listen online, which is how I always
Yeah, and I know. I could listen to it online, but I never do. So I've actually not heard him read it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But how has it happened? I don't know. Mm-hmm. I assume he has scouts, people who read through books and journals, but I really don't know. My only contact has been with the permissions editors.
Oh, really?
And it's just been a wonderful thing. But it's
because that poem was just on like a week ago, right? Or was that
Yeah. Yeah, December 28th, my husband's birthday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it was a nice present. And he actually had read one from my previous book, The Book of Kells, on my birthday,
Oh, wow.
November
Wow.
21st. So,
See, there's something weird that goes on in the universe. I don't know what it is, and poetry taps into it somehow, but
yeah. So sometimes when I'm reading poems at colleges, I feel like I have to gloss some of my materials from a previous age, like typewriter, something which preceded a word processor. And in this one, I am referencing an instrument called the telephone. Okay, I'm on page 9, regret. Regret nothing. Not those years when you were a single mother, bologna casserole, and not enough money for heat. Or the years before, the ones trying to please a man who couldn't be happy, no matter how hard you tried to replicate his mother's recipes. The marinara wasn't sweet enough. The lasagna didn't have enough layers. Don't regret the years that went up in smoke, the glamour of the lit match, the first drag, the curls that rose to decorate the ceiling. Or the years as a waitress, the customers who stiffed you on tips, which were quarters and nickels back then, every thin dime counting. Instead, remember your friends, those hours on the telephone, the artery of the long black cord, a river of voice. Don't tell me that broken places make you stronger, and I won't mention silver linings. Sometimes there are scars. Sometimes it rains. Stop looking for the friends who aren't here, the ones whose faces you sometimes glimpse in a crowd. The past is the grass growing under our feet, the dirt beneath it, what feeds it. Remember that nothing is ever lost.
Beautiful poem. Thanks so much, Barbara. That was
Well,
Barbara
thank
Crooker
you.
reading Some Glad Morning, which is just out from Pitt Press. I hope everybody picks up a copy and enjoys it. I just loved reading the book. I read most of it at my dentist office waiting room. And I was just really reading it for pleasure. And I kind of forgot to read it to interview you. That's how much I enjoyed it. So I hope everybody can pick up a copy. Thanks so much for joining us. It's really been a pleasure to hear your poems in your voice instead of Garrison's.
Well, thank you for having me, Tim. It was very kind of you to have me on the show.
Yeah.
And I love everything Rattle does.
Well, thank you. We'll have to have you on again with the next book.
Okay.
And hopefully the whole technical stuff will be fixed by then, too.
Oh, no, by the next book, we'll be doing holograms.
Yeah, probably. You'll be a little figure on my desk.
3D projections.
Okay, well, thanks, Barbara. Great to talk to you, and I hope you have a good night.
Thank you. You too, Tim.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, so that was Barbara Crooker reading Some Glad Morning, which is just a beautiful book by the Pitt Poetry Series. You can buy that. Well, her website is barbaracrooker.com, so check it out there and look at all her books. Now we're gonna do a hard break here and put on some bumper music and a splash screen, and then we're gonna go to the open mic afterward for people watching live on YouTube. And for the podcast version, the open mic is going to be included. So I will just see you next week. And next week we will have Clint Margrave. That's January 14th, 9 p.m. Eastern. Clint Margrave is the author of Salute the Wreckage. He's been in Rattle a bunch of times, including the current issue and the next issue. He's in the Tribute to Kim Adenizio issue because he was one of her students. And that will be next Tuesday night. I'm going to take a little break, and I will be right back with the open mic for those watching live. You can always call in over open mic over the phone, use Skype, or we have one pre-recorded poem set up. So I will see you in just a minute. And we're back. So if you'd like to join out on the open mic, you can call. Let me put this up on the screen because I don't know the number well enough myself. The number is 818-850-7727. Hopefully it'll work without my Skype program freezing again. But how it works is if you call and you happen to be in a middle section where I'm just talking, then I'll just answer. And if not, if it rings a few times and I don't answer, I'll call you back as soon as we have a chance. Because there's about a minute delay on the stream, so you won't know really if I'm talking or if we're doing a poem. But let's see, we have, Carrie Radna and Sarah Brickholt are interested in doing the open mic tonight. We have one pre-recorded. I'm just going to do one pre-recorded poem every night, I decided. We're sort of streamlining this a little bit more now that we've tested out and practiced. And today's pre-recorded open mic poem, which you can do yourself if you go to rattle.com/rattlecast. You can just upload a poem through Submittable, as long as the audio is good enough to hear. And you include the text so I can show it on screen. We'll do at least one, maybe two, maybe three every episode. Tonight we have a poem here by Octavia McBride Ahibi. And Octavia's poetry collections include Assuming Voices from Litpot Press and Where My Birthmark Dances from Finishing Line Press. And she lives in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, not too far away from Barbara Crooker, who's, I think, on the other end of Pennsylvania. So here is Octavia reading her poem, Preparations for the Voyage to Lampedusa.
Hello, I'm Octavia McBride. I am currently out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Today I will be sharing my poem, Preparations for the Voyage to Lampedusa. Now, Lampedusa is this large Italian island, obviously in the Mediterranean, and it is a destination point for many migrants who are disembarking from North Africa and crossing the Mediterranean for an entryway into Europe. A lot of these migrants are from all over, West Africa, from the chaos that's happening in the Middle East, so from Syria, from Iraq, just a variety of places. And since the past 6 years, more than 19,000 migrants have lost their lives in the Mediterranean. I wanted to sort of humanize and individualize that mass, And this poem, Preparation for the Voyage to Lampedusa, is told from the voice of a woman from Mali, the West African country of Mali, who is preparing her lover's body for his journey across the Sahara Desert, through the forests of North Africa, and eventually crossing the Mediterranean. Preparation for the voyage to Lampedusa. I tagged him like a suitcase in our wedding henna and the indigo of our gods, so sand and salt water could not erase him. Using a hand-rolled cone of discarded plastic, I labeled him in Arabic on his forehead with the translated love poems of Rumi, writing the arch of each eyebrow. I braided his eyelashes into a wind rose to inform a faltering will where grace blew the hardest. I pierced his ears with Voltaire's call to give ourselves the gift of living well. On the palms of his hands, I rendered in sloppy English the poetry of Lord and Night. Between the nervous Dogon mass that dressed his breast and the hairy lotus flowers that frame a navel I love to get lost in, I sung in the double swirl of earth's only colors, a plea an Italian to be kind. Amid the spiring canals of Sundiata's praise song that ran up and down his legs, front and back, I marked the empty spaces with the tattooed kisses of his children, and a P.O. box leading back to Kolakani. On his stained fingernails, I wrote our love dreams, a quarter-filled belly of lamb and hibiscus, a muted chest, feces that is thick and whole and free of the world's disdain. A means of stretching our children with ideas. I wrote this in Bambara because it glows in the dark, because it can lift a diminishing resolve from the clutches of a cold night desert, and even dance on death's imminent arrival in the middle of a beautiful sea that will reject him, disguised as a lullaby, to remind him at the moment he is embraced in a wet, frothy death hug that this failure is not his, it is not his, it belongs to those who will rescue his body.
Once again, that was Octavia McBride Ahibi from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, reading Preparations for the Voyage to Lampedusa. Now, beautiful poem. I want to check out her books now. I'm not familiar with Octavia, but I really like that. Okay, so once again, if you'd like to call in over Skype, call 818-850-7727, or send me a chat message to me at Rattle Poetry, and I'll reply over chat and then call you when the time is right. We're going to go to Carrie Radna now. She's called in before, so I'm pretty sure this will work as long as my Skype doesn't freeze. Calling her up now. I should turn off your ringtone. Hey, Carrie, I see you. I hear echo myself, so click off that YouTube screen before we start. Carrie, can you? I see you. There you go. Hi. So let me pull you in one second here. There you are, Carrie Radna. Nice to see you again.
Hey.
Yeah. So how you doing tonight?
Oh, pretty good.
Did you sit through the long delay, or did you come back because we screwed up earlier?
I came back a few times.
Uh-huh.
Barbara's interview was very interesting, especially when she talked about how she wrote poetry and stuff for her life. So that was pretty neat.
Yeah, I just love Barbara's work. I didn't know anything about her, but but it was really nice to get to know her a little bit.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So where are you calling from again? I can't remember off the top of my head.
New York City.
New York City. Okay, and what do you have for us tonight?
Okay. This is from my new book that just was published recently.
Hurricanes Never Apologize. So it's called. Who published it?
Yeah, it's published by a Luchador Press.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm going to read this, and it's also available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble if you want to pick up a copy.
Very cool. Okay, let's hear it.
Okay. This is Crossing the Border. All right. We are all trapped by the curve of our signatures. Our histories are somewhat similar, even though the names and locations we come from differ. We are almost the same, but we are not the same. We are carved in complementary shapes. My skin on your skin on my skin, even when reality blows forth an autumn chill, and we're nothing more than friends. Summer dreaming is as heavy as whipped cream. Our pseudo-children are golden and green, but you don't feel the same. You don't share the same dream. I let the sleeping kids lie. I lie to myself, making lions out of tabbies. Words are the only currency I could afford. Music is the only god I pray to. Could I will you to cross the border towards my side? The girls are waiting to lie down, sinking with the sun on the green.
Thanks so much. That's Carrie Radna from her book Hurricanes Never Apologize. Yeah, thanks so much for joining in, Carrie. It's always nice to see you again.
Yes. It was great. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Nob.
Yeah, have a good night.
Okay, you too.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so that was Carrie Radna. Let's see. Let's see. I think everybody else who asked to join the open mic is gone now because of that dropout problem we had. So I guess that's it for tonight. But thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for sitting through. I was going to mention in my spiel that I was really nervous about screwing something up because I haven't done this in 3 weeks. Oh, we have an incoming call, and it's Carla Schwartz. Let's bring her in. Carla Schwartz. Just 1 second.
Remembered.
Yeah, we have it all set up now. So it's Carla Schwartz, and I know you're the person who lives in a solar boat, and you're in Boston
That's
sometimes, right. And I have a little bit to jog my memory. So thanks so much for calling in. How are you doing tonight?
I am doing pretty well, although my voice is a little weak. But I'm not sick, but my voice is weak, unfortunately.
Well, that's all right. I guess 'tis the season. I think you're having a snowstorm there in the Massachusetts area, right, tonight? Is that right?
It's forecast. Not a big one, but a little one.
Gotcha.
And, so if you, if you go to my Instagram page.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Or actually, I put a link in the comments right now for where the poem would lead you from my Instagram page.
Okay, let me try to find that.
I can read you.
Let's see. Well, I can't see the comments. I have to do your Instagram page because the comments don't show up for me. So what is your Instagram name? It's
Okay. So if you go to my latest Instagram post, which is a poem.
What is your Instagram account again? I can't remember.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no problem.
It's CB99 videos. Charlie Brown,
gotcha.
99 videos.
Okay. Yeah, it's still up in my memory or history. So hang on, we will.
Right.
And is it the When You Wake?
It's called the Art of Shoveling, and the poem, I listed it on my Instagram page. Let me just get that one here, just to tell you. When You Wake, exactly.
Okay. No problem.
But you'll see the link there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you get that link, you can get the whole thing a little bit more easily.
Okay, we're all set up. Let's do it.
Okay. It's very seasonal. It showed up in this. It's a republication of my poem called "The Art of Shoveling," which originally appeared in my book called "Mother, One More Thing" from Turning Point Books in 2014. And this book and this poem is very seasonal, and it's light, humorous, hopefully.
Okay.
Which I guess we all need.
Yeah, we do.
When you wake to the thick white quiet, don't despair. When you know it will take hours and hours to remove the 2-foot and still falling shroud, don't shy from it. Before visualizing the entire driveway clear and you sailing out in your car, open the garage door. From the dry floor, scoop up one shovelful and fling it where you will not drive or walk. Fling it in the air. I'm also reading from this scroll. When, after a half hour, only a small square of blacktop has emerged and you have so much more, start singing. Yankee Doodle, maybe. You have earned that feather. Before you start crying, you have no one you can call to help. Take out an audiobook. War and Peace. Catch 22. Something that will do the shoveling for you. When the plow truck driver tells you to get out of the way and undoes your last hour's work, don't waste your shaking fists. Return the snow to the road and the truck is gone. When your back starts to feel the strain of the shovel, mount your snowshoes. Be a piston, float and sink. Make troughs alongside your shovel area. Somewhere to throw the snow, a trap to catch it when it blows.
Thank you.
That's it.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was Carla
You're
Schwartz
welcome.
reading her poem, The Art of Shoveling, which I personally care very much about the art of shoveling. I my first job was shoveling out sidewalks in my apartment complex in Western New York. And I appreciate shoveling now. We've had 72 inches of snow already this year, with more to come up here in the mountains of Southern California. So I'm going to get my back is going to get its workout. So thanks so much for sharing that, Carla. It's always nice to hear from you.
Oh, thank you, and you're welcome. And this is actually an instructional poem, because the little hint at the end is if you take out your snowshoes and you make these troughs, it actually makes it a lot easier on your back.
Ah, yeah, it would, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yes,
Well, thanks for that advice. I think I need some snowshoes. I don't have any. Well, thanks so much for calling in, Carla. It's always good to hear from you, and I hope you talk to you soon.
Yeah. Happy New Year.
Yep, same to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night. So that was Carla Schwartz. Those are probably our last poem from tonight. David Cook says he could read something. Let me call up David Cook. We'll see if he answers. So I decided to make this, the
Hello.
Hey, David Cook. Good to see you. You're on screen. We can see you and hear you. Happy New Year.
See here.
Oh, you're not ready yet? David, are you there? We can see you and hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, you're on. You're live. Yeah, everybody can see and hear. So, thanks again for another great question for the guest. It's always appreciated. What do you have for us tonight?
A poem, David Cook and I have a poem called Recess Beyond the Old Equipment, which was published in the Flatman Crooked. It was a publication that is no longer around, and it was chosen by Mary Carr for a semi-finalist, along with several others.
Ah, cool. Well, congratulations on that. That's neat.
It was that was like really early on, a while ago. So this one is. I also did a kind of a poetry conference where I was on a board for discussing poetry and how it feeds into your work. And I'm a gardener landscaper, and so this kind of feeds into that. That part of my life also.
Do you, I think my most productive summer as a writer was when I was working in landscaping. Being outside and just having time to think. I found it really helpful. Do you write poems sort of in your head and then as you're working?
Yes, I a lot of times what I'll do is I have a schedule, and I'll write the time in and time out on each of the properties. But a lot of times I'll have notes about poems that I want to write or ideas that I have or wordplay, and I put those times into my computer. I end up distracting myself and putting the poetry into the computer also, and doing a little bit of journaling, and then I never get invoices done.
Well, that's great. Yeah. Okay, so let's hear what you got.
Okay. Recess beyond the old equipment. There is neither room nor class inside, only the ricochet of stuttering light, blunt scissors, sour milk, peanut butter. But at recess beyond the old equipment, behind a wonky grid of cyclone fencing, nothing but desert boots or topsiders to tamp down blackberry vines, to stamp down bramble thick as a cat's arm. I hollowed out an os between ringing bells. Goose-stepped vines strung with berries, like thumb-nailed black ushankas. When I couldn't push down the canes, I pushed up a dome where the droops clustered like flies' eyes. The dark leaf below, and the light leaf over. It was not salvation, not refuge, not crucible. You will not hear of discarded cigarette, clotted beer bottle necks, nor the album of latex, nor the ragged tears of a plaid skirt, no moldering body found in leaves. I wasn't even late for class. Innocence, mind, way, nothing lost.
Awesome. Great poem. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, David. It's always nice to hear you and see you call in. Yeah. Thanks.
All right. I look forward to the next one. Yeah. This has been an education every time. I picked up Nicole Brown's Appalachian Field Guide, and I'm working my way through that, and it is fantastic.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah.
I mean, it's...
Yeah, I love Nicole. She's going to be teaching classes at our Wrightwood Literary Festival in the spring. So I'm really looking or in the fall, I should say. So I'm really looking forward to meeting her for the first time and seeing what she does as a teacher, because she's a great poet.
Yes. Where is that?
That is in Southern California, in the mountains where I live, outside of Los Angeles, and it's the last weekend in September.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you want to come down, if anybody does, we have Jimmy Santiago Baca is the keynote speaker. Taylor Molly's doing a slam poetry workshop and helping with the slam. And we try to get out in nature in the San Gabriel Mountains here and learn. It's not just poetry; it's a literary festival, so there's prose too. And we enjoy nature and writing and have workshops, so it's a lot of fun for a weekend.
Wow, that sounds great.
Oh, you're breaking up, so I don't hear. I think we lost you again. But thanks so much, David. David Cook, for calling again. I always love hearing from you, and that is it for tonight. Thanks so much for sticking with us through the technical difficulties, and hope you enjoyed Barbara Crooker. Hope you pick up her book, because it's a great, great book. Once again, next week, our poet is going to be Clint Margrave, and his book Salute the Wreckage is his most recent. He has 2 from New York Quarterly Press. That'll be Tuesday, January 14th at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. So I will see you then. Hope you have a great week, and I will talk to you soon. Good night.